about to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Jim here at TTDHQ. Welcome to our latest A-Level Business live stream revision session. And today we're starting a series that just focuses on topics drawn on the Edexcel A-Level Business specification. We've done quite a few for AQA over the last few weeks and months, but now it's time to start doing them specifically for Edexcel students too. And joining me today in the middle, we have Susan,
Hello.
which must mean on the right. It is Graham. So two familiar faces for those of you who've joined our previous sessions. Welcome to you if you're joining us live. I can see from the live chat lots of students joining us live. And of course, if you're joining us on catch-up or replay, a warm welcome too. Graham, do you want to give us a flavour for what we're going to cover in the next 30 minutes or so?
Yes, thanks, Jim, and hello to everyone. So as Jim's mentioned, the focus of this session is content, topics and concepts drawn from Theme 1 and Theme 2. We've got a range of activities, MCQs, calculation quizzes, a new activity called Beat the Teacher. We've got red herring, you name it, we've got it. So we'd really like you to use the chat window if you're watching live. So where applicable, you can type your answer into the chat window and any queries you've got. Hopefully we can pick up on those. If you're watching the recorded version, then of course you can pause the video and take a little bit more time because some of these questions are rather challenging. But we're going to start off with, Susan's going to take us through a little starter activity as we wait for more people to join the live session, and it's an activity called Altered Vowels. So Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Graham. So the first activity, as Graham said, is called Altered Vowels, and I'm going to show you 3 key phrases which each have had a vowel change to an alternative vowel. All you need to do is work out the key phrase and type it into the chat window. So let's take a look at the first one. So remember, the vowels have been changed, but the consonants have stayed the same. All you need to do is think about which key term this phrase represents and type that into the chat window, please. So it's coming from the operations area of the specification. So think about that area particularly. So think about the different production techniques, possibly. That's a big clue. So let's take a look at the first answer and we'll see if you get the hang of it. It is cell production. So just the vowels have changed and the consonants have stayed the same. And cell production is where the production line is split into a number of different self-contained units that are responsible for producing part or all of a specific product. So let's take a look at the next question. So have a look at the phrase and type into the chat window the key term that you think this represents. So just the vowels have been changed, not the consonants. So it's a different functional area this time. All you need to do is change the vowels. And we've got an answer coming through. Thank you very much. Any more? Some great answers coming through, and they're the right answer. And the answer is market segmentation. So that's the process, remember, of dividing a market into groups of people based on different and distinct characteristics such as demographics or lifestyle or location. Well done, and thank you for the contributions. And the last one. So back to operations. So have a think about the key topic areas in that part of the specification. Which is the key term for this particular question? And again, type it into the chat window. So got some answers coming through. Any more? Thank you. A couple coming through so far. And another. So the answer is, thank you, everybody, is outsourcing. And outsourcing sometimes is modelled up with offshoring. Outsourcing is in year 12 of the specification, whereas offshoring is in year 13. But outsourcing is work which is completed currently by the business, but then is given to a third party or a subcontractor to complete, which increases the capacity and flexibility of the business. And it can be given to specialists who are more proficient in completing those specific tasks. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'm going to pass you back to Graham.
Thank you, Susan. So hello, everyone. So we're going to go through 5 MCQs, multiple choice questions. So the first couple are, you'll be given a question, 4 possible answers, A, B, C, and D. All you need to do is work out the correct answer and type the corresponding letter into the chat window. So the first one is, what is the correct formula to calculate the asset test ratio? Is it current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities? That would be A. Is it B, current assets divided by current liabilities? Is it C, current assets minus inventory? Is it D, current liabilities minus inventory divided by current assets? So asset test ratio, a key part of the Edexcel A-Level Business specification. Can you determine which is the correct formula? What do we think? Now, the asset test ratio was recently examined in a previous Edexcel A-Level Business paper. A lot of students did struggle to calculate the asset test ratio. As with any calculation, the starting point is the formula. So what do we think? Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Or is it D? It's certainly one of those. It is certainly one of those. What do we think? So I can see 1 or 2 answers coming through the chat window now. Remember, if you're watching the recorded version, you can take your time with this. Let's reveal the answer. And the answer is, of course, A. Current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. That is the correct formula to calculate the asset test ratio. Now, remember, you will not be given the formulas in the exam, so it is therefore crucial that you are on top of your formulas. Okay, let's move on to question 2. So a key model here, the Boston Matrix. So a product with a low market share in a high growth market is called a question mark, a cash cow, a star, or a dog. What do we think? So this is a key part of product portfolio analysis, often taught alongside the product life cycle. So what do we think? According to the Boston Matrix, a product with a low market share and a high growth market is called is it a question mark? Is it a cash cow? Is it a star? Or is it a dog? What do we think? Now, in an exam, you might be asked to maybe assess the value of the Boston Matrix to a particular business. Remember, in all the assess questions, you need to produce a balanced response. So it is really important you understand the different models and theories and their value and limitations. So some answers starting to come through now. And see an answer there from Dixie coming through. An answer from William there. Different term, but William is correct. Let's reveal the answer. Jim, it is a question mark or a problem child. So either of those. We didn't have problem child on there, but William, you are correct. Dixie, you are also correct. So let's move on to the next one. So Elton Mayo's motivational theory is known as what? Is it known as two-factor, the hierarchy of needs, human relations, or scientific management? Now, there are 4 motivational theories on the Edexcel A-Level Business Specification. You need to be on top of all of them. Elton Mayo's motivational theory is known as what? Is it known as two-factor? Is it known as the hierarchy of needs? Is it known as human relations? Is it known as scientific management? Great to see so many answers coming through. There's a bit of a dispute between which of these is. It's easy to get them mixed up, and that is why strong knowledge is really important as a foundation for all the answers. So it's really easy for students to get mixed up between the different motivational theories and start writing and applying the wrong one. Let's reveal the answer. And it is the human relations theory. So it's based on the Hawthorne experiment. So the two-factor theory is Hertzberg. Hierarchy of needs is Maslow. Human relations is Elton Mayo. And scientific management is Taylor. So remember, scientific management is all about really like pay and piecework. Okay, let's go to question number 4. So something different now. We've got 2 statements here. All you need to do is read the statements and decide whether the statements are true or false and select the corresponding letter. So product orientation involves responding to customer needs and wants and meeting customer preferences. Is that true or false? Statement 2, creating and setting up a business is a characteristic of an entrepreneur. So we've got 4 options there. If you believe statement 1 is true and statement 2 is true, select A. If you believe statement 1 is true and statement 2 is false, select B. If you believe statement 1 is false and statement 2 is true, select C. If you believe statement 1 is false and statement 2 is false, then you would select D. So what do we think? A few seconds on this. So we've got product orientation involves responding to customer needs and wants and meeting customer preferences. Is that true or false? Statement 2, creating and setting up a business is a characteristic of an entrepreneur. Is that true or is that false? So we're starting to see some answers coming through the chat window. Now remember, there's no MCQs on the Edexcel A-Level Business papers, but we've just started with some MCQs because that allows us to cover lots of content in a relatively short space of time. So I can see 1 or 2 answers coming through. Let's have a few more seconds. Read those 2 statements carefully and decide whether you believe they are true or false. A couple more answers coming through. Jim, can we reveal the correct answer, please? Now, both of those are false. So, product orientation, it does not involve responding to customer needs and wants and meeting customer preferences. That is market orientation. Now, the second statement, you need to be really, really careful with this. So, creating and setting up a business is not a characteristic of an entrepreneur, it's a role of an entrepreneur. Now, the Edexcel specification makes a big distinction between the roles of an entrepreneur and the characteristics of an entrepreneur. Now, in paper 3 in 2017, there was a question on entrepreneurial roles. And if students started talking about characteristics such as hardworking, initiative, being resilient, then that wasn't accepted because they are characteristics of an entrepreneur, not a role of an entrepreneur. So make sure you understand the difference between the roles of an entrepreneur and the characteristics of an entrepreneur. Let's move on to the final MCQ, number 5. And we're going to look at PED. So a product with a PED coefficient of -2 is price elastic. Is that true or false? Statement 2, low capacity utilization reduces the average costs of production. Is that true or is that false? So A, B, C, and D are exactly the same as question 4. All you need to do is read those 2 statements and decide whether you believe they are true or false. And please type your answer into the chat window. So price elasticity of demand along with income elasticity of demand are 2 commonly examined concepts, as is capacity utilization. What do we think? So we've got some answers coming through very quick there, and it looks as though, from what I can see in the live chat window, that most of us have got this correct. Jim can reveal the answer. So statement 1 is true, statement 2 is false. Higher capacity utilization would reduce the average cost of production because the fixed costs are spread out over more units of output. Well done. Okay, let's move on to another question. So we've got a business here, and this actually is real and exists because I was in that shop 2 weeks ago. It's in Ambleside. Ruby Shoes Day is a shoe shop located in the Lake District. After local incomes increased by 8%, the owner of the business noticed that the quantity demanded for shoes increased from 80 pairs a week to 96 pairs per week. Based on that information, can you calculate the income elasticity of demand for Ruby Shoes Day? Now, a very similar question was examined, I believe, in 2018. So this is the type of calculation question you may get in an exam. All calculation questions on the Edexcel A-Level Business Specification are worth 4 marks. So you have 60 seconds to try and work out the income elasticity of demand for Ruby Shoes Day based on the information on screen. Jim, can we have the music, please? Okay, so a few more seconds. There are some answers coming through the chat window. There are some answers coming through the chat window. We can turn that music down. That's no problem at all. We can turn that music down. That's no problem at all. Or you can turn your own volume down. That's not an issue at all. So we've got some information there. We've got the income's increased by 8%. We've got the increase in quantity demanded. The first thing you would need to do is work out the percentage increase in quantity demanded. You need that in order to calculate the income elasticity of demand. So there are a few answers. Now, there's an answer that is sort of correct. It's not 100% correct. And I'll reveal why when Jim reveals the answer. Now, the answer is plus 2.5. There was 2.5% in the chat window. That's incorrect. It's not a percentage. It's plus 2.5. So we've got the percentage change in quantity demanded. Remember, it's really important that you understand how to calculate percentage increases and decreases. The simple way is the difference divided by the original times 100. So we've got the percentage change in quantity demanded is 20%. Our formula for income elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. So in this case, 20% divided by the 8%, that gives us an income elasticity of demand of plus 2.5. So really important in the 4-mark calculation questions that you show you're working out. That way, if you get the final answer wrong, you may get some marks if whoever's marking your work can see some evidence of understanding. Yes, Oliver, this is indeed the chat box or the chat window. Actually, I quite like the chat box. I think we should go. Well, Mark's in there. Would 2.5% lose a mark? And the answer is that would depend on that would depend on standardization. It's not strictly correct. It's not a percentage, and it doesn't have the plus sign in front. So my feeling is that would not be credited with full marks because it isn't actually fully correct. So remember, income elasticity and price elasticity of demand is not a percentage. So just be careful for that. And it's good that you've put that in there because it's allowed us to talk about it and unearth a potential misconception. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So quite a simple question now. This is a 10-second countdown. You have 10 seconds to answer the question on screen. 2 little quick knowledge blasts here, very straightforward. So can you state the 3 elements of the design mix? Can you type them into the chat window? You have 10 seconds with which to do it before the rocket takes off. Jim, can we start the countdown, please?
T-minus 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
Now, what do we think? The 3 elements of the design mix. Now, we've got some answers coming in already. A few more seconds on this question. So I think some students are writing the marketing mix. Now, that is why we particularly chose this question, because students see the word mix and therefore just always default to marketing mix. So if you get a question on the design mix, it's important you understand that the 3 elements are function, aesthetics, and cost. It's not the marketing mix, which is product, price, promotion, and place. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Can you state 3 different pricing strategies? There are several on the Edexcel A-Level Business specification. If you can write down 3, please, and type them into the chat window or chat box, that would be great. Yes, Oliver, you can use calculators. You can use them here and in your exam. Jim, can we start the countdown, please?
Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
So Dixie's on fire there. I think we might have to call it 999s because she was straight in there. Dixie was straight in there with price skimming, price penetration, cost plus pricing. We've got predatory pricing. We've got price skimming in the chat window. These are the ones on the specification. We've got cost plus. So you need to be able to calculate that. That is markup. So you need to be able to calculate cost plus pricing, price skimming, penetration pricing, predatory, competitive, and psychological pricing. Often students get confused between 2 pricing strategies and end up losing marks because they start writing about the wrong pricing strategy. Okay, let's move on to another question. So this is a new activity. It's called Beat the Teacher. Now, what we've done is we have put some deliberate mistakes on the next slide. All you need to do is read the text, and can you, in the chat window, identify the mistakes? Can you spot them all? Jim, can we see the text, please? So this is on break even. So you've got a little bit of reading there. Can you identify any mistakes in that text? Can you beat the teacher? So we've put some mistakes in there. I don't think you'll be able to spot them all. Can you prove me wrong? Can you spot the mistakes and beat the teacher? What do we think? So I'll quickly read through it while you're reading through it as well. So when a business is breaking even, its revenue is just enough to cover its fixed costs, and the business is making neither a profit or a loss. Achieving break even as an important milestone for a business, as the quicker the business breaks even, the quicker it makes a loss. Break even can be calculated by using the formula fixed costs divided by contribution per unit. For example, if a business had yearly fixed costs of £36,000, a selling price per unit of £20, and a variable cost per unit of £5, then the monthly break-even point would be 2,400 units. In order to reduce the break-even point, the business could increase the selling price This would lower the contribution per unit, meaning the business needs to sell fewer units to break even. So straight away, Dixie has spotted a potential error. So Dixie believes that fixed costs should actually be total costs. Is that a mistake? Is it fixed costs or is it total costs? Can we spot any more in there? Might be worth just looking at that calculation. There could also be an error in the bottom paragraph. There may not be, but there could be. What do we think? So this is quite a useful activity because it really tests your understanding of whether or not you really know the concept inside out. So by spotting the error, it means you actually know that it's incorrect. So what do we think? Any more errors there? Can anyone spot any more? Remember, if you're watching the recorded version of this, you've got plenty of time to pause the video and spend more time reading through the text. What do we think? Can anyone spot any more? It'd be great if we could see one or two more errors in there. What do we think? So Dixie is correct. Actually, fixed costs, it should be total costs. So that is incorrect. Let's have a quick look at the errors, Jim, if we could reveal those, please. So it is indeed fixed costs was an error. It quicker makes a loss. That's an error. That's a mistake. The calculation was incorrect. It wasn't 2,400 units. That is the yearly break-even point. So if you calculate break-even, fixed costs divided by contribution per unit, then you would have found that you would have gotten 2,400 units, but it says the monthly break-even, so that should have been divided by 12. Now, increasing the selling price wouldn't lower the contribution per unit. It would increase the contribution per unit. Now, obviously, we've gone through that very quickly. Jim, if you reveal the next slide. So if you want to watch this back again, watch the recorded version. That is the correct text. So going back through that reveals the correct answer. What I really wanted to highlight there is often in an exam, you may be asked to calculate the monthly break-even point. Lots of students just calculate the yearly break-even point and forget to do that next step. That is why it is so important to show you're working out. Okay, let's do another question. So we've got a calculation question here. It is on variance analysis. So you've got the budgeted and actual income and expenditure of a business last year. Can you calculate the profit variance and state whether it is adverse or favourable? So this is, again, an examiner favourite. It's something that has been examined before. Remember, calculate the variance and you must state whether the variance is adverse or favourable. Jim, can we start the timer, please? Okay, now that is a tough question. I mean, that is a really challenging question, especially in 60 seconds. There's some answers coming in the chat window. Some people just typed in favourable. Now, it is favourable, but the question was calculate the profit variance. So it's really important to make sure you read the questions carefully. So we needed an actual figure and then whether that was adverse or favourable. So the answer was actually £20,000 favourable. So to work it out, you firstly work out the budgeted profit. So the budgeted profit was 140,000. That's a 220,000 minus the 80,000. The actual profit was 160,000. That's a 250,000 minus the 90,000. Remember to calculate the variance. It is the difference between the actual and the budget. So the actual was 160,000. The budget was 140,000, so the profit was £20,000 favourable as it was 20,000 better than expected. Well done, everyone. for having a go at that. I'm going to hand you over to Susan now, who's going to do a bubble quiz.
Thank you, Graham. So I'm going to show you 3 questions which each have 4 possible answers. However, unlike a multiple choice question where there is one answer that's correct, the number of answers that are correct this time can range from 0 to 4. And all you need to do is decide how many answers are actually correct. So let's look at the first question. Which of the following are current liabilities? So A, payables, B, cash, C, inventory, and D, receivables. So into the chat window, if you can type the number of answers that you believe are correct, remember it can be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And if possible, if you can type in the letter that also corresponds with the correct answer or answers, that would be great as well. So I think you got a bit of a clue in terms of the answer then. So think about the statement of financial position, which would be current liabilities. And the answer would be, let's take a look, A. So we did get an answer in the chat window. A is actually the only current liability. I will slow down. So A is the current liability, and payables is the amount of money that is owed to suppliers by the business as they have been given trade credit by their suppliers. The rest are examples of current assets. Students often get receivables and payables muddled up, so be careful of that. So receivables is the amount of money owed to the business by customers. So let's take a look at the next question. Which of the following is the formula to calculate contribution per unit? So A, variable cost per unit minus selling price per unit. B, variable cost per unit times selling price per unit. C, fixed cost divided by variable cost per unit. And D, selling price per unit divided by variable cost per unit. So if you type into the chat window the letter or letters, if any, that correspond to the correct answer. So contribution per unit is a really important concept in business. It's part of the break-even formula, so think about that if you're struggling in terms of thinking about the actual formula. Remember, as Graham said earlier, it's really important that you know the formulae really well when you go into exams, because you will not be given formulae in any exam paper. So we've got some answers coming through, and the answer is that none are actually correct. The formula to calculate contribution per unit is actually selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. So it's A, but the other way round. So make sure you get the parts of the formula in the correct order: selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. And that means how much each product is contributing towards paying off its fixed costs. And as I said, an important part of the break-even formula as well. Question 3. Which of the following relate to the concept of limited liability? So A, business will be incorporated. B, business will be unincorporated. C, owners will lose personal possessions if the business fails. And D, the business continues to exist if the founders die. So look at the different options, and then again into the chat window, type the letter or letters and the number of options that you believe are correct. So limited liability, a really important concept. It links to private limited companies and public limited companies. So which of these particular statements linked to the concept of limited liability? Remember, that's when the owners or the shareholders only lose the money that they invest in the business if the business fails. So look carefully at the terminology. There's lots of key terms in there. And the answer is A and D. So limited liability means that businesses will be incorporated. That means they get a separate legal identity to the owners, and therefore the business can continue to exist even if the founders die. The other two options relate to unlimited liability. And again, this is a concept that students often get muddled up with, limited and unlimited liability. So I'm going to pass you back to Graham now.
Thank you, Susan. I just put in the chat window there, I think, like a shout out, like a Radio 1 DJ, that it's Mr. Lindor's business teacher of Oliver Moss. It's his birthday today. Many happy returns. So this activity is called Red Herring. You will see 4 fish. 3 of the fish have something in common. That is written on the fish. 1 is incorrect. That is the red herring. Can you find the link between the other 3? It'll make more sense when we have a look at the 4 options. So on screen, we've got salary, supervision, achievement, and working conditions. One of those is an odd one out. It's a red herring. The other 3 are linked. Can you work it out? What do we think? So salary, supervision, achievement, and working conditions. One of those is a red herring. That basically means it doesn't belong there. It's an odd one out. The other 3 are linked. Can we type the answer or what we believe into the chat window? I'll give you a clue. It's related to a motivational theory that is on the Edexcel A-Level Business specification. What do we think? One of them is an odd one out. 3 are linked. Remember, if you're watching the that is for me to say, if you're watching the recorded version of this, then you've got more time to spend on working out the answers. Some answers are coming through. Let's reveal the answer, please. Jim. And it was actually achievement. All of the other 3 are hygiene factors. So this was related to Hertzberg's 2-factor theory. So salary, supervision, and working conditions, according to Hertzberg, are hygiene factors. Hygiene factors don't motivate. They simply reduce dissatisfaction, whereas Hertzberg argued that achievement was a motivator. So achievement was the red herring. The others related to hygiene factors. Achievement was a motivator. We'll do one more of these before our final activity. So we should know the concept by now. So we've got a few layers: narrow, wide, and more delegation. What do we think? So one of those is a red herring. The other 3 are linked. I'll give you another clue. It's related to organizational design or organizational structures. So can we work out? So that's this link. It's not the red herring, it's the link, but the topic's organizational structures. But one of those is an odd one out. The other 3 are linked. So can we delve a little bit deeper and ascertain which of those is incorrect? So some answers coming through into the chat window or the chat box. I do like the chat box, to be fair. What do we think? A few more seconds before our final activity. Couple more coming through now. Jim, can we see the correct answer? So the link was flat structure, and B relate to a tall structure. So few layers, that referred to or relate to the hierarchy. C was wide spans of control. Flat structures a small opportunity for delegation given the wider spans of control. And narrow we would associate with a tall structure, narrower spans of control. Okay, now it's our final activity and nicely links the first question to the last. So we looked at the asset test ratio as our first MCQ, and we're going to put that into practice. So we've got a business which has £400,000 of inventory, £100,000 of receivables, and £500,000 cash. The current liabilities of the business are 20% lower than the current assets. Can you calculate the asset test ratio of the business based on that information? We should already know the formula because we covered it in the first question. So a little bit of a percentage question there to get to the current assets, and you should be able to calculate the asset test ratio. Jim, can we start the timer, please? Okay, that's quite a challenging question there. I'll give everyone a few more seconds to see if they can work out an answer. See what we think. So some answers coming through the chat window. Now remember, it's a ratio, so we need to be mindful of that when calculating this. So we should know the formula for the asset test ratio, which is current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. Now, so we can work out what current assets minus inventory is just by adding together the receivables and the cash. So, and then from that, we can work out the asset test ratio. Jim, can we go through the answer? Remember, if you're watching the recorded version, you will have more time. So the current liabilities were 20% lower than the current assets, so we need to find out the total current assets, which is the 400,000 plus the 100,000 plus the 500,000. So 20% lower of that is £800,000. So the asset test ratio is basically our current assets minus inventory, or in this case, all we need to do is add the £100,000 receivables to the £500,000 cash, because that is in effect current assets minus inventory. We divide that by the 800,000 and we get an asset test ratio of 0.75 to 1. Now what that means is for every £1 of current liabilities, the business has 75p of current assets minus inventory. Now, be careful when looking at ratios whether there's no real thing as an ideal ratio. It depends on the business. Many retailers, especially supermarkets, operate on very low current and asset test ratios because they are cash generating businesses with a very high stock turnover. So if you struggled on that question, then by all means, please revisit the recording. You will also be able to download a version of this presentation shortly. And there we have it. Whew.
Superb,
Covered a lot there.
40 minutes, bang on. Superb
40
stuff.
minutes. We covered a lot there, and it was great to see so many answers and interaction in the chat window. So hopefully you found that useful. We will be you'll be able to watch the recorded version and download a copy of the PowerPoint. We are aiming to run more of these. If you are a bit unsure of some of the concepts like income elasticity of demand, things like that, on our YouTube channel, we've got some revision blast on that particular topic. Nothing left to add, really. I think lots of interaction there, Jim. We covered an awful lot, lots of exam gold in there. Hopefully you found it useful. Please, if you liked this recording, please give us the thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you will get an alert when we are running one of these. And also we will push and promote the time of the next one on our teacher Facebook group. So hopefully your teachers will be able to advise you when the next one is. So I think on behalf of Susan, on behalf of Jim and myself,
indeed,
thanks for taking the time to spend with us, and we'll see you at another one shortly. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.